Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Desviados Mentales. We're here tonight with a good friend. We're keeping his identity anonymous for obvious safety reasons. Brother, sir, what a pleasure to have you here, man. I'm glad you said yes to the invite. You and I had already talked a little through messages. We'd love it if you could share your story with us. How are you doing?
Good evening, bro. Thanks a lot for inviting me to this session. I'm doing great, thanks. To be honest, man, I'm high as hell right now. But chill. It's all good. I just like staying nice and sedated all the time. But I'm not doing dumb shit like I used to anymore. You know what I mean, right?
Ha ha ha. Yeah, I get you. I've heard stories. All right, brother, please, start by telling us, how old are you? Where were you born? What was your family like when you were growing up? What was the environment like at home? How many siblings do you have? How do you get along with them? We'd love to know all the details. We've got all the time in the world. Please, feel comfortable. The mic is all yours.
Thank you very much. Yes, look, the story is a bit long, but since you want to know, I'll take all the time to explain it. For security reasons, I can't tell you exactly which country I was born in, but as far back as I can remember, it's from the age of 3. I remember my dad and my mom. I remember we were living for a while in my mom's parents' house, where some of my uncles, cousins, and my half-brother, my mom's son from another man, also lived. Actually, I'll see that. You see, I haven't told you that my father had already been divorced and had 2 children who didn't live with him, and my mother had also been divorced and had a son who always lived in my mom's parents' house. I remember that at that age, I was happy. I mean, I didn't feel empty inside, nor did I feel like something was missing. I didn't understand what a family was. I just felt protected, cared for, valued next to my sister. My dad would go to work most of the day as a truck driver, and we would see him very late at night. Sometimes he would come home when we were already asleep. I always got excited to see or wait for my father. My mother didn't work at that time. I want to make a parenthesis and clarify something from the start. I feel that since I was a child, I always saw the world with a consciousness that wasn't normal for a child, and I knew it. I don't mean I was a prodigy or anything presumptuous. I mean that as a child I knew I could approach or touch an ant. I'm not here to tell erotic stories. That's not my style or intention. The point here is to emphasize that a child's early sexual development is influenced and stimulated both by the individual's genes and by the environment or setting in which they grow up. In this case, it was an aunt who was my uncle's wife, my mother's brother. The land never been terrifying to me, said it. But here's a look, I see it. It's based on another clear that they don't always see. Above, I feel that interaction with her molded me and partly defines who I am or influenced my behavior. My uncle's wife, my mother's brother, was very beautiful. I wanted her to be mine. I was envious that she was my uncle's. That's how I felt and saw it at that age. I mean, she would hold me and treat me well, pamper me, press me against her body, and I didn't know what I felt. Then now, I want to see that. It's the darling and that's the then help me to that state terrain. Know that from that age I felt lust, a lot of sexual desire for her. Today I can distinguish all that, so I can assure you, I don't know if my aunt ever sexually abused me, no matter how much I dig into my mind and memories. I can't remember anything like that. If she didn't violate me, then maybe I was already like that with those disjointed desires, and it didn't stop there. It was like a monster that grew little by little inside me. When I know size today, then she when I done she there. The desire to have sexual relations at such a young age. Oh, no, I didn't know what to do or how to perform the sexual act, but I felt those urges. I'll leave that aspect for a moment and return to the family environment, both the nuclear family and the broader family circle. I mean my mother's family. My mother is the oldest of her 2 sisters, and she also had 6 brothers, 2 younger than her and 4 older than her. That is, my grandparents were constantly having children irresponsibly as it was, and still is today. Therefore, my mom's parents' house seemed like a tenement, with people coming and going up and down the stairs. It was annoying because you couldn't even watch TV or be at peace, because an adult would always come to bother you, especially an uncle whose name I won't mention, but he was one of those who would pass by and call you names, and that started to make me insecure. He would call me pig, fat, etc. And all that started to wear me down, stress me out, and I understood that even your own family could attack you, and your mother wouldn't say anything, wouldn't defend you or your sister. Besides, my mother's son would make us do his chores, treat us rudely, yell at us, threaten us, humiliate us. And I felt defenseless, just like my sister. And I didn't tell my father because I wanted to avoid problems. Until I see a change. Also, since I was a child, I was always very curious. I would put 10-cent coins into TVs, throwing them into the slots at the back. And obviously, when they were turned on, they would short out. Yeah. Down there, you already know anywhere. Out in order die. But I didn't do it to mess things up. I mean, I didn't know what would happen. I just wanted to experiment, to see what would happen when you put coins in. And I did it with TVs, radios, ja? Yeah. And the radio don't want to show. Yeah. Hysterisch show say, and chitty. Sometimes my mother would say that I would open the jar of cream and smear it all over my face, and leave a blender full of cream on the bed and furniture. They had to tie me to the crib so I wouldn't make a mess. Yeah. And I think in part my mother and everyone saw that from that age I was very restless, observant, and couldn't stay still. I wanted to know where the cartoon characters that you heard on the radio came from, or how they got into the TV, how that sound came out of there. Anyway, getting back to it, that's when the intergenerational abuse started. Then I had already become bitter. Something had changed in me. I was already spoiled, already broken, burst at the seams. It was just a matter of me continuing to grow, and I grew up without resentment, with a desire for revenge when I got older. Even today I think about it. I can't assure you that I won't do it against all those who hurt me. Sometimes I think about killing them, or going all out, but anyway, I'll come back to that topic later. At this point, I was between 3-5 years old, and I also had sexual experiences with my cousin, who was the same age as me. We would kiss on the stairs, and we would ask each other all the time if we were still boyfriend and girlfriend. Until one day, an alcoholic uncle found us and told us that it wasn't right because we were our cousins, and to stop doing it. I was left with a thorn in my side. That same uncle, I once saw him very drunk, chasing one of his sisters. It seemed like he wanted to play, but something inside me and told me he wanted to rape her. From then on, I started to despise alcohol and alcoholics, without knowing that later I would become an alcoholic and drug addict. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. I just want to point it out so that no detail of the context is overlooked. Similarly, I didn't like the matriarchal control. It pissed me off that my maternal grandmother was always overprotecting me. Million dollar always see. Going down D, down down. Later we moved out of that house to the house my mother and father had built. From there I would see the potheads on the corner who were my neighbors, and since I was a child, I always said that when I grew up I would try read to see what it felt like. There in the new house, it was also a very tough time because I would hear my mother and father always arguing about money, dot. And well, to cut a long story short, I would take out all my frustration on the animals. Cats, dogs. I would tie them up, torture them, and once, when I was older, I killed a black cat. I hit it from under the car with a stick, and my Doberman grabbed it by the neck, shook it, and broke it. I heard how its neck broke, and saw how the life left the cat, how its eyes lost their light. That moment my sister, and a girl who had taken care of us since we were little, saw me as a monster, and indeed I was. That day something died inside me, and I knew I owed the death of a cat, and that I would remember it forever. My sister said something like, "Don't be stupid," that I had killed it. I felt like trash. You know, I've always thought that maybe one day I'll die the same way, because those who live by the sword die by the sword. Today I protect animals and plants, and they come to me. I don't know if God will ever forgive me for what I did, but for now all I can do is tell the truth and let God judge me. Everyone wonders what leads a person to do that, and I feel that since I was a coward in my school, when I started first grade, the first thing I said was, "How much time of my life am I going to waste here?" 6 years of primary school, 3 years of secondary school, and what follows, it seemed eternal to me. It seemed like a divine punishment. A punishment from God, and to keep suffering. I was always a coward in school because I never defended myself from the bullies. I was always afraid to fight, and that others would see me defeated. I always preferred to be a coward also with women, but I'll tell you about that later. I mean that the stress from my home and the stress from school, I would take it out on the most defenseless beings. My mother would tell me not to tie up the animals because they were suffering, but I would justify it by saying they were misbehaving and needed to be corrected. I'll try to summarize my childhood as I did, much as possible, by telling you the most important points or those that marked me the most. I never liked any school, from kindergarten, daycare, primary school. I never liked being separated from my aged father. I always saw my father as my hero, although I knew he wasn't perfect, but I always wanted to be with him. Although I never cried for fear of what others might think of me. That is, I cared more about what others thought of me back then. I always hated school. For me, it was a prison. I hated everything, the classes, the teachers, my classmates. I never fit in with anyone. Isolate myself and start drawing. My escape was always in drawing. I always felt excluded for being obese. I always lived in fear of being bullied, and that others would see that I was a pushover. That I didn't defend myself. I never accepted and still struggle to accept the life I was given. Sometimes I accept God's will, but sometimes I rebel. And back then I felt that everyone was against me. Since that age, I wanted to commit suicide. I didn't want to live. I didn't see the point in life. Even today I get very depressed. But anyway, I suffered from asthma as a child and part of my adolescence, so I spent a lot of time alone in the hospital. Even once I was hospitalized for more than a month. That is, it was as if God, life, or the universe wanted me to be alone. Saw it, and that's how I still feel today. It's I think that's how I was being prepared to be tough in the face of loneliness and to know that you are your only company and the one you should trust. I was arise. Later the rest they do the direct would spend my time drawing, reading the comics. My father brought me to the hospital and listening to La Mano Peluda at night in the hospital. Funny enough, I was never scared or saw anything weird in those places, or at least I didn't notice. In the early morning, I would walk around the entire hospital when no one was there, and I would explore all the areas I could. I would tell the guards and nurses that I couldn't sleep, and they would let me keep wandering around like a ghost, like a depressed ghost. Later, I learned that the asthma is caused psychologically, as the mother transfers an irrational fear to the child, and the child in turn channels it as asthma. My mother did this so that my father would come home early from work, or in other words, my mother did it so that my dad wouldn't have time to screw other women. That's what I know now, but anyway, in short, yeah. 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 When I was 11, I saw my first pornographic movie, which the girl who took care of me and my sister got for us. I remember that at first it made me want to vomit, like my sister, who actually did vomit and went to the room. But that awakened my sexual desire and my disjointedness even more. Afterward, my mom found out and scolded us a lot. Another thing I did wrong was humiliating this woman who took care of us. I humiliated her so much that I made her cry, calling her names. Nicknames. I was a jerk. Later, I would have to pay for all those humiliations. In secondary school, it was the same. I was lazy. I didn't talk to the girls, but I didn't mistreat anyone anymore. I kept everything to myself and kept eating out of anxiety. Therefore, I felt guilty and responsible for being fat and justified that my life was crap. I had a very high sexual desire. At 12, I had my only first ejaculation, and that made me masturbate every day. I would spend between 3 and 4 hours doing it. From then on, I became addicted to pornography. We would exchange movies in secondary school, and Albert bought sticky hardened magazines because someone couldn't hold back and finished on them. Adolescents addicted to pornography. I was desperate for a woman, and some of my secondary school classmates had already had their first sexual experience. Being a minor, I kept having sexual experiences with another cousin who was also a minor like me. In my mother's family, since there were so many people, romances between cousins had always been an open secret. It had happened before, it was happening at that moment, and I don't know if it still happens, but at least I don't do any of those acts today, although I must say that many times the women in the inner family circle, whether cousins or young aunts, when they entered adolescence, they were the ones who started sitting on your lap, kissing you. That's the truth of what I experienced, and many men don't mention it. I'm not saying it doesn't happen the other way around, but at least in my case, that's what happened. I know I shouldn't mention it here, but for me, this is like an act of catharsis. My sexual disjointedness reached a very high level. Despite all that, I was still afraid of women who weren't in my close circle. My schoolmates always told me to talk to women, not to be afraid of them. Around that time, we found out that my dad was screwing the maid. My mother supposedly kicked him out of the house, and supposedly I did too, and my dad went to sleep in a car outside the house. Later, my father was forgiven by my mother, and basically my father kept screwing both of them, and my mother tolerated it. Since my mother had a knee accident around that time, she went from the house to the hospital, and from there it was many years of therapy and pain, where my dad took advantage to screw both of. I still the touch tricks all the once. That But anyway, this is something I found out later, and my mom always tolerated it. Getting back to me, I said, oh, in all that context, I tried to go out with a girl who lived near the arcade machines in a secondary school, but she was going out with an older guy who didn't even go to secondary school. The thing is, I gave her several stuffed animals and told her I wanted to be her boyfriend, but she rejected me. Oh, she said she had a boyfriend and that even though they had problems, she couldn't be with me. I tried to kiss her at that moment, which was after school, but she didn't want. That devastated me. Oh, I told her, so, why you couldn't one touch her? Or is that one? I knew it was because I was fat, stupid, and lazy that women didn't want anything to do with me, nor did they respect me. A few days later, at the arcade machines, she was kissing her boyfriend while I was playing in front of them. That hurt me a lot, and from then on I swore never to declare my love to a woman again, nor to humiliate myself, nor to give them anything, nor my attention. I was in the 3rd year of secondary school. I remember that afterwards she would give me looks, but I was already disappointed. I must say here that I was very lazy in secondary school. And annoying child, and certainly would go to the arcade machines for hours, and even my mother would bring me back home with slaps and beatings because she was worried I would disappear. She was very strict and always cared more about our studies than anything else. She even beat me and my sister for getting a 6 on our report card, but that helped us to be who we are today. Later, I understood that she was right, because one time something related to my addiction to the arcade machines happened. By the way, I always had addictive behaviors to food, to video games, except but anyway, I continue. Oh no, Saturday's my sister, and I would go to a computer school, but I would sneak out to go to the arcade machines. One day I went to some arcade machines where a fat guy, bigger and older than me, started hitting me on the neck like a karate chop. I didn't know what to do. I laughed because I was scared, but he kept hitting me while I kept playing. I felt in danger, but didn't know what to do. I didn't know what he wanted from me, or at least today I think and say that he wanted to rape me. Thank God a guy from the computer school, who was over 20 or 30 years old, saw me and said, "What's up? What are you doing here?" And I told him I was playing arcade machines, and he kind of understood what was happening, and that this obese guy wanted to abuse me either physically or sexually. He said to me, "Well, come on, let's go to school," and he was skating with some roller skates. At that moment I felt saved by God, but as always, I didn't tell anyone what happened to me. And today I think I was about to be sexually abused. Maybe I deserved it for all the harm I had already done, justifying that others had harmed me first. Several times I skipped secondary school, and every time my mother caught me one way or another, but I was never good at skipping school. Yeah. I was always rebellious but scared, although later that went away. My father was only focused on providing money, and my mother was like a general who made us study on days off and weekends, so that we would have an intellectual advantage over others. To be honest, I must recognize that all that discipline helped us. In the 3rd year, I found out that the most annoying guy in my class was my cousin, and you can imagine, as I advanced in secondary school, I became more rebellious. I started getting punished for doing bad things to my classmates and teachers. They once said, well, this I'm not that old, and they can At that moment, I started to lose control a bit, and the teachers would tell me to be careful because I was a good student, and my cousin could ruin. Nature on it here no. But then near. Shy, Dustin, Bella, Shower. From there, we finished secondary school, and I entered high school. There, in the first year, I hung out with only girls. Since I had lost weight and grown taller, I felt confident. I had my first girlfriend who later cheated on me because she was a real slut and made me face her new boyfriend. I declared my love to my best friend because some guys talked me into it, and in the end, my best friend told me to fuck off. And well, the first year ended, we entered the second year of high school, and like all first-year students, we were mixed up, so I didn't end up with anyone from my first year. Grew to ordinary days, and I reached to the dark state attracted in that adolescence, and then it switched out at age. That devastated me. I couldn't get over it. The friends I had made in the first year I had lost. They would greet me when we saw each other, but it was never the same. We grew apart. I kept going to classes, but sometimes I would skip them, go to the arcade machines, eat, go home early. I didn't make new friends. I refused, until one day my mother told me to make friends. And well, that's what I did. I started hanging out with the guys who skated in the back of the high school, where there were some concrete tables. I ended up there because a guy I had classes with would hang out there, and we started talking. One day he asked me where I was going, and I told him I was going for a walk, and that's how we became friends, apparently. Afterward, he took me to the routes, courts, and the guys who skated gave me my welcome. First, they would all hit me hard. Then they would grab me by the limbs and throw me into a hole where there was straw. Yeah, lay down and told me I fell like a rag doll. That day they welcomed 2 new guys. At that moment, I knew it was all artificial. That is, I didn't feel a connection with them. I still felt alone, but at least I would have someone to spend my lonely and empty days with. When I was 17, I asked my dad to take me to a concert of the music I liked. I still remember Ja. Yeah. And it was there. It was interesting there, where, with all the previous traumas I had been carrying from childhood and adolescence, it was there where, for the first time in my life, I met Mrs. Marijuana. It was there where I smoked cannabis for the first time, and I haven't let go since, until now, that I'm still smoking weed.
Well, yeah, it's pretty intense everything you're saying. It's a lot of information. For those wondering what country my friend is from, he didn't explicitly mention it. But he did he drop some clues that only those from that city in the world will understand. What can I say, brother? Just with this fragment of the story, we see many aspects of you that shaped you. I've heard in many addict stories that the moment they try a substance, at that moment, it's a turning point where many things start to happen, both clear and dark. I mean, I know not everyone goes through the same things, but I mean that these are stories with several common points. Now, your life from that moment on, how did it change? What happened? When the sergeant, but I that's so. What did you feel when you smoked marijuana for the first time? Whoa. Who did you smoke with? Nice. Oh. From what I understand, the addiction kept growing. Please continue with your life experience. It's perfect, just the way you are. Telling it like a timeline.
Well, look. There were some cholos at that concert I went to. It was a rap and hip-hop concert. And well, I saw they were smoking weed, and I said, "Hey, what's up? Roll me one." I signaled to them, you know, and those dudes rolled me a joint. They didn't give me any trouble, and they were some badass cholos, all bald and stuff. Those guys who carry guns and knives. I mean, obviously, they brought it around yesterday. Probably didn't have them there because they had been checked. But from then on, I started hanging out with the crew. And the truth is, that time I didn't feel anything, you know. I mean, I've just heard many experiences where people say that the first time with that plant, well, many didn't feel anything, right? Maybe it's because we don't know how to smoke it, or because I don't know, maybe. The first time there's something that makes you not feel it. I believe more in the first option, you know, that we don't know how to smoke it, or hold the smoke or anything, and you just cough, you know. And from there, about a year passed. I kept going to high school, kept hanging out with the same guys who skated, and I told a friend, you know. Well, when I had smoked, when I had recently, smoked, I said, "Hey, you know what? I smoked." He said, "And what did you feel?" And I said, "Well, the truth is, I didn't feel anything." And we knew that the guys who skated there smoked, you know. So one day, a year later, we saw some guys smoking, you know. And this friend said, "What's up? Those dudes over there are smoking. What's up, dude? Should we smoke or what, dude?" And supposedly he had also tried it once, but it hadn't hit him right. I mean, we were both kind of trying it out for real, you know. So we went under the concrete bench and we sat there with these guys. And it was all what's up and all that, you know. The camaraderie, getting along with them even though they're not your friends or schoolmates, but they're your supposed buddies. So they said, "Do you really smoke weed or what?" And we said, "Yeah, give us some hits." They pulled out one of those jitters that are like closed pipes. And the truth is, those jitters are really good. It's like a pipe that so screws shut, and you put the green material, the herb, the marijuana inside, and then you just heat it up and it works like a little oven. It really does the trick. In fact, just talking about it makes me crave it, to be honest, because it also gets a kind of baked flavor, the baked hit. But anyway, they rolled us that thing. We took a hit right there. For the first time, I felt like I really hit the marijuana. I felt its rough taste like burnt grass, but it tastes more like, I don't know. Well, it smells like skunk when you're burning it, but it tastes like if you were burning a straw mat and trying to smoke it. Yeah, I mean, it really smells and tastes like that, like when you burn straw or a bit of sugar cane, but more stinky like skunk. And obviously, we didn't smoke it right. We held the smoke for very little time, didn't inhale it or pass it to the stomach like you're supposed to. We coughed, and you know, the crew laughing at you, realizing you're a rookie. And, well, that's it. Part of it is letting the smoke out, and by the third hit, I was already super high. I mean, when I let the smoke out from the third hit, I was already super high. I felt like in that hit my soul left me because I started to relax really hard. And I looked around and saw everyone laughing, but I was already on another level. At that moment, I looked at my friend again, and my understanding is shown to that where I don't look at that. Friend was also super high. He had really red and teary eyes, you know. He said, "Damn, you look really red." And I said, "No, you too." And you know, you start acting silly, laughing for no reason. And I, to be honest, enjoyed, or rather have enjoyed marijuana a lot because it made me laugh. It made me laugh a lot. I can tell you I spent years laughing. I'm not saying I didn't have adventures. that were also painful. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but more or less I mean that it always made me act silly. That's why I always liked marijuana, because it relaxed me. I can tell you that. For me, that first trip I had with marijuana was what I loved about it, you know? Because at that moment I felt super relaxed. Everything stopped nattering. Nothing worried me. All that weight I was carrying from all my childhood that I already told you about, right? And all my traumas and all that stuff. It was like a release valve from the pressure cooker that I was, or that I still am, you. No, I had a great time. I mean, after that we walked away. We got up from there. Everyone saw we were super high, you know? There was noise and commotion, you know? And rightly so, all that atmosphere. I thought, damn, I know this is artificial. I mean, I know that in the end these guys are as lost as I am and are here because they feel lonely. And I thought, me too. And I thought, well, at least now I know this is my palliative. It's what's going to help me survive in this violent world, in this grotesque world, in this world that I've never liked, in this apathetic world. And above all, in this depressing world, you know, with many injustices. And you know what one thinks at that age. Back then I was already 18. I realized that I felt like all the people were, like holographic stickers of iridescent color that were overlaid or stuck in an album that was reality. I mean, like seeing the Matrix, like a projector where you don't walk, only the environment. That is moving. I don't know if you understand me. It's like when someone stands in front of a projector and is riding a bike, and the projector reproduces a path, and supposedly you move along there with the bike, like the ones in gyms to trick you, as if you were outside. Something like that. So, I really liked that. That day we had a good high, ate well. I loved how food tasted with the effects of cannabis starting in the said, oh, when rationally it's down. And you leave the bad, kind of deceit, and it's all, you all don't cry. And from there, I got hooked. And from there, that day I got home and everything was fine. Nothing happened. Back then, my mom worked at a secondary school and came home later. So we returned house. Time to sober up, wash my face a bit, eat something, so I wouldn't look like I had been smoking weed, and especially my hands, the smell that stays from what I smoked. I can tell you that, well, I think about a week passed and I smoked again. Why? I mean, supposedly, I was going to give it some space, and I kept going to classes, but then my consumption started to increase. It started to be every third day. At first I didn't smoke before going to class. Then I did. Then I had to be high all day because I couldn't stand being without drugs, without marijuana, because it relaxed me and made the world seem more fun. I've always said and always said it, and well, I still maintain it, that many addicts, many drug addicts. I don't know about alcoholics because I consider myself more of a drug addict for being more depressive. Look, alcoholics are more melancholic. Addicts are more depressive. Drug addicts to substances, they are two different personalities, but it doesn't mean one is better than the other. They are just different, but they have things in common, and I started going to all my classes high. Wherever I went high. Why? Because I didn't give a damn to be honest. For me, life has always been very boring. And even today, when I've had periods of abstinence 1 or 2 years on my own, or because others restricted me, life has always been boring for me. For me, life never had flavor. Maybe before I was 3 years old, but afterward, society screws you over. So it's impossible not to grow up with traumas. There are many scars, many traumas that will never heal, Even if you go to therapy, even if you talk to psychologists or psychiatrists who just dope you up with medications. Believe me, I've tried all that. But anyway, I don't want to get ahead of myself. What I want to tell you is that I always skipped classes. I didn't care about anything. I didn't even put in effort, nothing. I always stank of weed. The teachers didn't care. My classmates didn't care either because I didn't care. I started to distance myself even more from the few classmates I talked to who really weren't friends. Not even the ones from the courts. The ones who skated, because I felt it was all so artificial, you know. At that moment I didn't know what a drug-dealing spot was. I had never risked going or anything. But there came a time when there was no weed, and we had to go get some from the spot, you know. At least that's what my friend told me, who curiously had the same name as me, and my name is not a common name. Later, he betrayed us. I'll tell that story later. But I mean also since I kept not hanging out with women or anything, and I still didn't have the will or character to quit weed and dedicate myself to sports or other productive things, I kept sinking into drugs. I didn't try other things, thank God, at that moment, although later I would, before telling you how I started to risk going to buy drugs at the spot. I want to mention something very important that happened to me here, and that was like another door, another circle, another limit that I crossed in the world of drugs. There came a point when my compulsion to get high started to increase, and I started to get high in areas where it was easier for the school authorities or outsiders to catch me. Belligerence, they call it. Rebellion. The act of defying authority, of mocking it, started to grow in me. I remember once I was getting high in the bathrooms, and the lighter didn't work. Then a dude from outside threw me his lighter door in me. I saw it as a solid move, and for a moment I felt really badass because I smoked wherever I wanted. Suddenly I looked at my reflection in the mirror and saw a gaunt guy with a grey face, grey eyes, no light in his eyes. At that moment I repeated out loud, "You're a drug addict now. There's no turning back. You can't stop." It was sad, but I felt it was better to start accepting things so they would be less painful. After that was when I had to go get drugs from the spot. That first time for me was unforgettable.
Wow, brother. What can I say? Honestly, I'm surprised by everything you're telling us. I understand that there are many experiences, some painful, others that, consciously or unconsciously, we might categorize as fun, but all with a high level of risk. Now, I think the part you're about to tell us, your first time at a drug dealing spot, is one of the most important. Not just because of the weight it carries in your story, but also because of the impact it can have on the audience listening to us. And it's important to clarify, we are not encouraging anyone to do any of the things shared here. That's exactly why. At the beginning of the program, we clearly stated our 3 disclaimers, along with a clear warning. We completely disassociate ourselves from any act or stance expressed by our guests. Here, we are only sharing an experience. No names are mentioned. If they are, only clues or nicknames are used, but there is never a direct reference to any of those, you know, the little mischievous groups. No need to mention them. What? We don't talk about a specific country or continent. We talk about the whole world because the rot is global. But anyway, let's get back to what's important. Brother, please continue with your story. We want to know everything. What happened? How was that first time you went to that place? What did you feel? What did you think? I don't want to put ideas in your head or get ahead of anything. We want to hear it raw, exactly as you experienced it, what you felt, what you thought, almost what you smelled at that moment. We want the audience to experience the essence of that moment, to understand, not to imitate. This is about conveying reality, not inducing repetition. In other words, if you do this, this other thing might happen, or you might not even be able to tell the story because your subscription to this world gets canceled. So, brother, please, we're listening. Continue.
Look, first of all, I don't like burning spots. I don't like burning points. I don't like any of that to avoid trouble. That time we got to the courts, bro, we wanted weed, and the dude who invited us, who had the same name as me, said there wasn't any, and that we had to go to the spot to buy some. So, what the hell? Let's go to the spot. And honestly, I did get a bit nervous, you know. And to be honest, when they said the spot, I thought, what's a spot? I mean, imagine that level of naivety. I mean, obviously, I was just a kid starting out in that mess, so I said, a spot? What's a spot? I even mentioned it out loud. We were in a little group, and after I said it, the group dispersed a bit. At the moment, we were deciding whether to go or not. There were several chicks there, including this one chick who was the cool one. I know up our Stuart. She said, "Oh, it's where, you know, where they sell drugs." And I thought to myself, yeah, that's true. I didn't want to ask, but obviously, inside I thought, yeah, it's where they sell drugs. And I thought I had to man up so I wouldn't look like an idiot in front of the crew. Obviously, at that age, you care a lot about what people say. But anyway, we went, and it turned out this place was near the high school in a rough neighborhood. You know, the Chukka neighborhood, where there are a lot of drug addicts, a lot of thieves. Poverty, like in many parts of the world. Poverty that, honestly, often makes people get into shady businesses or start stealing. But I'm not going to criticize anyone for that. Everyone has their own life. Anyway, we went, and this dude, who I said has the same name as me, points at me and says, "All right, you're going," pointing at me. And honestly, I did get nervous, you know. The first thing I thought was, what if the cops show up? What if the police, or any authority, whether it's the police, the army, the military police, the guard, whatever exists in the country where you live, busts the place, raids the joint, and you're there. They catch you, and you're either a buyer, or they might confuse you with being a seller, a trafficker, dealing, not dealing. While they investigate, you go to That's what always scared me, and at that moment I started to feel and think about all that. I thought, damn, what the hell am I getting myself into? But another part of me said, you gotta do it quick and clean, no messing around, no acting like an artist or any of that bullshit. Just do it and fuck it, almost like doing it without thinking about the consequences, even though you know it could go wrong, whether it's by God, by life, by luck, because it's your destiny, by free will. I left my stuff in the dude's car or at the high school. I don't remember very well. I had a 50-unit bill, and with that bill I could get 2 bags. Each bag was about half an ounce, around 14 grams, because real ounces are 28 grams. So I figured each bag was about 14 grams, and each bag cost 25 units. Tot. Back then, weed was cheap. For 50 units, you could get about 20 marijuana cigarettes the size of a regular cigarette without filters, maybe even a bit more. So I went to the spot. It was our house, a really rough tenement, you know, the classic tenement with a black ribbon on the door, and you know you can enter, but might not be able to leave. I was shitting bricks. My heart was racing. But honestly, I started to like defying authority, or rather, I was losing my fear. I was on the edge. So I'm going in, and I see a kid playing with his tricycle in the courtyard, classic right. I see the whole scene of poverty, the kids there, people involved in illegal substance deals. That's why there are ribbons on the door. You realize the marginalization, all that. You don't rationalize it, but you feel it, and you think, damn, it's just like in the movies. Maybe movies and series exaggerate a bit, but honestly, it's tough. So I see the whole scene, and I see a dude coming out who looked like he had already bought something. I look up, and a guy on the roof whistles at me. I look up and tell him I want to buy weed. The guy looked like the one from the movie, Amores Perros, the Sirs, guy in charge of the dogfighting business, just like that guy, exactly like in that movie. So the dude signals me to come up. It was ground floor, first floor, second floor, and the roof. I get up there and tell him I want 2 bags, man. He gives me the 2 bags. I give him the bill, and I think, now get the hell out of here quick, because it's going to get bad. I rush down the stairs. My heart racing. I never understood, and I still don't understand, the guys who go to buy and then stay there to consume at the same spot. I get that it's because of addiction, especially those who smoke crack or cooked cocaine. It messes up your life faster. But the challenge is to get out with the bag of weed in your pants and make sure no patrol car shows up. I wasn't trained in any of this, but that's how it happened, because at that moment you start to improvise. So I go back to these dudes who were waiting for me, and they say, "You took forever to smoke." The dude who was supposedly the leader said there was a place, like a place where race cars run. There are bleachers, and anyone can get in because they're training during the week and don't charge. They only charge when there's an event. It's like a big sports center. Honestly, I did want to smoke, but I wanted to go back to high school because I didn't feel safe smoking on the street. I realized that most of the shit that happens in the mess is because you let other dudes lead you. And I'll confirm that for you later. To make a long story short, we started smoking weed on the bleachers. We bought some toilet paper, and many people give this trick. When you don't have a rolling paper, buy toilet paper and use the colored wrapper to smoke it. But it's just colored ink paper, so you can imagine what it tastes. Like weed with ink, haha. But we had to improvise. As I smoked, it kind of made me hallucinate. All that adrenaline from what had happened at the drug spot, everything I was experiencing that day, I needed to relax. But something inside me said we should leave, that it was going to get bad. And it did. Suddenly my friend says, "Start throwing everything away discreetly, because 3 cops are coming." I look, and sure enough, 3 uniformed cops are coming up. Discreetly, I threw the bag back from the high bleacher where we were. To make a long story short, the cops asked what we were doing, checked our hands, and told us to take out everything illegal we had. They gave us the classic line that they had seen us on cameras and that people had reported us smoking marijuana. I think maybe they had been watching us since I left the spot. But anyway, they took us down from the bleachers. The commander had his eyes all red, and Thierry was more high than we were. Most cops are also drug addicts and alcoholics, and they smoke what they confiscate. And you too. The cops asked if we had anything else, took what they found of the green material. And then this dude, who had the same name as me, pulls the commander aside and gives him something like an MP3 player. A cell phone, I don't know what he had. One of those USB MP3 players or something. He takes off on his skateboard. I thought, "Dan, that dude just left. What an asshole. He betrayed us. He always said he'd have our backs. And at the first sign of trouble, he bailed on us, fucked us over, left us." I thought, fuck him. We'll settle this later. I thought, now we gotta get out of this mess. If I let this go on, they'll take us to the station, and then they'll call my mom. And it'll be a whole mess because they even checked my high school ID. I could still pass as a minor because that's what my ID said, even though I had just turned 18. I think they even kept my ID. Back then, there were these Nokia press music cell phones, and I had the slim one with the little buttons on the side play pause next. So I thought, all right, I'll give it to them, but in the end, they won't be able to use it fully. It pissed me off to give it to them, but it was necessary to get out of trouble, to get both of us who were left out of it. Before giving it to the cops without them noticing, I broke the SIM card base, took out the SIM card or the chip, and gave it to them. With that, I don't know if my friend gave them some money or another device. Honestly, I don't remember. I think that dude didn't have anything, but he had the car, so they let us go. I don't remember if we had left our backpacks with the skater crew or in the dude's car. Honestly, I don't remember very well. It's been over 15 years, you know. And then, high as hell, how am I supposed to remember? That dude with the car drove me home that day. We even stopped to eat something to chill a bit with the little money we had left. But I told him, damn, that asshole fucked us over, man. Fuck him. Tomorrow, I'm gonna expose him to the whole skater crew. And I think if we went back to school that day, we started telling several dudes about this dude's betrayal, and the whole crew said, damn, that's messed up. What an asshole for leaving you guys. I said, I'm going to expose him to the crew for being a dick and a snitch, so no one trusts him anymore. I don't give a fuck if he wants to fight me. Cowards and snitches are never welcome anywhere, because honestly, I was really pissed about that betrayal. And from that, I learned never to trust anyone on the street or anywhere. Those are things that get reinforced over time, and if you slip up, they'll happen to you again later. That's why I don't trust anyone now. I even test myself, because when shit hits the fan, everyone looks out for themselves. But anyway, that's what happened that time. I got home. Back then they still didn't know, or rather they suspected but didn't know everything I was doing. You know, washing your hands well, your mouth, your teeth, even showering again, or washing your face so you don't smell like burnt weed. It was a fucking hassle to take care of all those details, especially because my mom seemed like one of those who can smell drugs. She was the director of a secondary school and found her students smoking weed in the bathrooms, or huffing glue, PVC, or even sniffing Resistol in a paper bag, or any drug that fucked them up. And me, the son of a director, going to buy drugs at the spot. I felt like that day she was about to find out everything, but again, I didn't listen to the voice in my head saying, stop your bullshit, it's going to get bad. Today you already lost a cell phone that you bought with your own scholarship money and all because you can't stop smoking.